Okay, this video may be offensive to some people who do mix at Unity. My apologies if it comes across that way, but I wanted to follow up with an original video I did covering the issues with mixing at Unity. And hopefully this video will provide a little bit more insight into maybe why mixing at Unity is not such a good idea. Alright, so some time ago I did a video covering the issues or problems with mixing at Unity. And since then I've received some good comments on the video, but I've also received a couple of emails regarding it. So I wanted to do a follow-up on the whole concept of mixing at Unity. And basically what it is when people set their faders at 0 and they will set their master fader here at 0, and they will proceed to use the gain controls to set their levels and try to find a balance between the two. So in that original video I just said this is wrong, and I covered why it was wrong, but I really didn't get into too much in depth as to why you should not be running a console this way, whether it's an analog or digital console. The gain coming into the console and the fader that's associated with that input, these are two different entities. This is completely different than the fader, and they need to be treated completely separate. You cannot look at a fader and the gain control and think they're doing the same thing, because they are not. These are two separate entities. The gain is the input into the board. The fader is the output. This is gain. This sets the amplitude of the signal coming into the console. The fader sets the volume level on the output of the channel. The output meaning this could go to the main bus, this can go to subgroups. This is the output. This sets the signal to noise ratio of the input coming into the console. This does not. This is the volume control. This affects the sound quality of whatever it is that's connected to the input. This does not affect the sound quality. Setting gain in a system, the first point that it comes into the console is all part of gain staging. Without proper gain staging, you're going to have issues with that signal throughout your console. With gain, you're amplifying the input voltages that are coming in from the microphone, or it could be coming in from a DI box, coming in from a, if you will, a built-in DI on a lot of guitar cabinets. The fader is not amplifying those voltages. Remember, the fader is only a volume control, and it's a volume control on the output. The gain is input. Now, unfortunately, people use the term gain and volume to mean the same thing. They are not the same thing. And I think this is why people sometimes get confused that the fader and the gain control are doing the same thing. The gain is the input stage of the signal. The fader is the output stage. And there is no balancing act that is needed or required between these two. It's because these two are separate entities. So if you're trying to find a balance here and a balance here, that is not the way to use a console. All right, so here's my example. With the fader turned up, this is why people think that the fader and the gain control are the same thing. Now I'm talking into channel 5. Test 1, 2. Now the gain is turned down all the way. Test 1, 2, but I have the master fader turned all the way up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the gain. Test 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2. So that's why I think people think that this is the same thing as what's going on up here on the gain control, and it's not. What we're doing on the gain is we're adjusting the input voltage of the device that's connected to it, and in this particular thing, it's just a regular Sennheiser E835 mic. Now, this is pretty loud, and as you can tell, I really don't have any signal coming in on, up to barely of the signal coming in on the channel. But yet everything was really loud because I had the master volume over there turned up to unity, and I had this set at unity. And I was controlling my volume using the gain control. But I didn't have the proper gain into the console. Check, 1, 2. So right here, now obviously, we don't need this up because we don't need that to set any kind of gain because this is our output. We're not interested in the output at the moment. All we're interested in is the input coming into the console. Test, 1, 2. Test, 1, 2. All right, it's peaking at 0. All right, let's go over to the main. All right, let's check out the main. Now, we don't need to turn the main output all the way up. We just want to turn it up some so we can hear some of the volume coming out. All right, let's go back and take a look at the channel. Test, 1, 2. Check, 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 1, 2. All right, we're going to add some volume to it. Check, 1, 2. Test, 1, 2. Test, 1, 2. Now I've got proper gain, test, 1, 2, coming into the console. This means that my master fader, this is almost at the same volume level what we had before, but if you notice, the master fader is not at 0. This gives me just this much more headroom to use on the output of the console. So how does all this gain staging and setting faders, how does that impact the digital console? Well, it does it the same way. There's no difference between anything that we would be doing here and setting our gain over here. These are two completely separate things. This is input into the console. This is output. Setting everything at unity up here, and we're just going through and we're just setting the gain level because we don't want this to move much. So we want our volume and stuff to be set using the gain. Well, this does not work because if you have all these different mics that you could have in your sound system of what you're using, all of these mics have different sensitivity ratings. This mic here has a different sensitivity rating than this one. This is a kick drum mic. This has the lowest sensitivity rating. So the gain for this has to be different, has to be set up differently than, let's say, a vocal mic, which a vocal mic has a better sensitivity rating than the kick drum mic, and as well as a tom mic. So its gain setting is going to be different. Then if you look at a condenser microphone, the gain settings on these really need to be adjusted carefully because these are extremely sensitive. So if you were to say this fader here belongs to this mic, if you're setting the volume level up here just so you don't have to move this, I mean, this could be a problem with this mic. Too much gain can introduce a lot of feedback into a system. This is why gain staging is extremely important because not all mics are made the same. Proper gain staging, this whole sound quality is a lot better. The impact that drums can provide for the PA is a lot better. All right, so when people are mixing at Unity, we'll see them do this on the master, and then we'll come over here, we'll see them starting to set all their faders up wherever they need them to be, and then they'll go up to the gains, and they'll start setting the gain with what's going on down here with the fader. They're trying to find that balance. Now here is the biggest problem with trying to mix at Unity. When you start your mixing by setting an output level and also by setting the output levels, the volume levels of the faders, you're doing all this without knowing what the input level is going to be, which the input level is at the gain. So how are you going to set all of your output levels when you don't even know what the input levels will be? So when you're mixing at Unity like this, you're working completely backwards through the system. You're setting all your output levels without even knowing what your input levels are going to be. This is working completely backwards to how a console is made. The signal comes into the gain, it goes through the channel strip, it hits the volume level here, your output, and then it goes through the bus and it comes out your main out. So setting all your output levels first makes no sense, especially when you don't even know what your input levels are going to be. Right? And it's no different if you're on a digital console as well. If you're starting out like this, you're automatically working backwards through the system. I think I mentioned this in the previous video, but some manufacturers, Allen Heath specifically, tell you do not run your console this way. So when we have the levels up like this, don't let these faders dictate how you're going to set the gain. The faders need to show you what the console is doing. Do not let the faders dictate how you're going to run the console. Let the faders tell you how the console is running. So earlier I mentioned there's usually problems involved when you have improper gain staging. And not setting the proper gain, you're not getting the full benefit of the microphone. And sometimes people say, oh, I need better microphones. A lot of microphones, even the cheaper ones, are still decent. They just don't have the proper gain structure set for that mic. Once again, they're setting their gain structure here based upon where they want the fader to be. And sometimes what I hear very common is people complain about the preamps in their consoles. And many times it's because they are not using the preamps or the gains correctly on their console. They're setting the gain level so the fader doesn't have to move. This is incorrect. When setting stuff up like this is why sometimes people complain that their systems aren't loud enough. They've got their fader set to Unity, they've got their output fader set to Unity, but yet it's not loud enough. I mean, this is sometimes a common complaint is that people need louder speakers. They just don't have the proper gain staging, the proper input level coming into the console. And when you're making all your adjustments here at the top to accommodate the faders, what can happen is that the signal to noise ratio, you're not setting them correctly. And a low signal to noise ratio introduces hiss into the system. So if you think you have a noisy system, it's usually because the gain is not set correctly. A good signal to noise ratio provides a lot of audio dynamics in a console. Doesn't matter if it's analog or digital. So you're going to need a high signal to noise ratio. Right? A common term that I've heard when people are mixing at Unity is they said they want equal loudness through the system. And they feel that they are getting equal loudness if they set everything to 0. There is something called a Fletcher-Munson curve. And this curve shows you how loud something has to be for it to sound equal to other frequencies of what you're listening to. So for example, on the image, you'll see at 1,000 hertz. And if you go up to 40 phones on that, you'll see that it's right about, let's say, 40 dB. But if you look at go to the left we get around the 40, 50, and 60 hertz range at that 40 phones level. Look how high up in decibels the bass frequencies need to be. It looks like it's probably somewhere around 80 dB. So what that is saying is if I'm listening to, let's say, something that has lower frequencies in it, as well as higher frequencies, it could be anything, music, for it to sound equal, you would need 80 dB of bass compared to 40 dB of the mids and high frequencies. So basically, you're going to need 40 more dB on the low end to sort of match in how we perceive sound, how the human ear perceives sound. You're going to need 40 more dB of bass frequencies. So this is not equal loudness. Same here. This is not equal loudness. And as I had stated a few times in the previous video on this, if you're setting all these to 0, what's the purpose of the faders if you're going to be doing all of your levels and control up here at the gain? If you're using your gain control for everything and you're just setting these to 0, there's no need to have faders. So why would a manufacturer put faders on a console just to have them move up to 0? All right, so just to recap early on what we're talking about, this is gain, this is not. This is an input into the console. This is an output to something else in the console. This is not volume control. This is volume control. This controls the signal to noise ratio of the signal. This does not. This can affect the quality of the sound of the mic or the instrument coming into the console. This does not. The gain and the fader are two separate entities and need to be treated completely separate. For example, this is a cheaper Mackie Pro FX 12. It's got gain for all the channels and it has faders for all the channels. All right, and so here's a little bit of a bonus. I did a video covering a matrix, and I was using our Allen Heath GL2400. But here on our Soundcraft GB8, we have 8 subgroups, and we've got basically 3 main outputs, left, right, and center. So this matrix here, this is an 11 by 4 matrix. So we have 11 inputs going across, and we have 4 outputs. And each of these rows here is one of the subgroups. And then over here we have left, right, and center. And we can send all these, just like on the Allen Heath, we can send all these to one or all 4 outputs. Here are the main outputs for the matrix. So anyway, just sort of a follow-up here. All right, well, I hope this helped shed a little bit more light on the problems with mixing at Unity. We covered the analog board and we looked at our digital board for these setups. So, hope this helps, and use the console the way the manufacturers intended them to be used. All right, thanks for watching.